Hi, and good evening, everyone. My name is Albert, and this is Vlogs About Nothing. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy Monday evening to join me. I really do appreciate it. Never gets old. I do appreciate you. One thing I do appreciate also just equally as much is a good villain. Anyone catch my drift? A good villain always makes a great story, goes so much further. A good villain comprises so much more than just somebody that, wants to do bad things. And in fact, let's approach how we view a villain. And as antagonistic as the villain may be in Western storytelling, just how necessary it is to complete a good, cool story. And again, just it's a whole vibe. I mean, have you guys seen Smallville? Let's start there. So, Smallville, it's a great, adaptation of what would eventually become the story of Superman. I mean, it explores all of what happens in the first 18 years of Superman's life, not just the missing ages of, is it like 11 to 30 or something, like that other story that sort of closely resembles the missing years of a famous person that has powers and stuff. You know what I'm talking about? I don't have to say it. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, then hey, I might be just as dumb as I think I am. But scary truth, that might actually be point in fact. So, as much as I, make fun of myself, I might just be stupid. Anyways, I do, think that Lex Luthor, as introduced by the storytellers in Smallville, before Superman finds out that he has powers and so forth, it, explores the relationship that Lex Luthor and Clark Kent have. These guys are childhood friends. That's the extent of which a good villain is needed in any story, because the story starts far before the story starts. You feel what I'm saying? Like, that's why there's whole canon and backstories and history as to how these characters come into contact. But if you watch Smallville, you always kind of want Lex Luthor to do the right thing instead of becoming who we know he's going to become later on. Now, is that fair? Like, if you didn't know that Lex Luthor was going to become the villain to Superman in this example, you wouldn't think that Lex Luthor's anything other than just some rich dude's kid with maybe some of those sorts of problems. But as it turns out, he's got a heart full of jealousy, and he's just super jelly in the end. Lex Luthor is a villain that's just very jealous of Superman, and clearly misunderstanding of what it's like to just be good for goodness sake. Quite literally, that's Lex Luthor's problem. He can't quite grasp his mind around how somebody can be so good, while at the same time they can potentially be so bad. He just doesn't seem to understand that. It's the trademark of a good villain. It's longevity. It creates and provides storytelling opportunities for upwards of 100 years since the character's introduction. Right now, I'm watching a show called One Tree Hill. And in One Tree Hill is one of the most diabolical, sinister, yet appealing villains in all of episodical sitcom history, I dare say. And Dan. All right, so Dan Scott is who I'm talking about. And while Dan Scott might be not a household name like Lex Luthor, Dan Scott is certainly one for the ages. If you guys have never seen One Tree Hill, it's a show that is about basketball, and it also is involved like a bunch of people in their 20s parading to be people in their late teens as high school students that get into these interesting situations. And I didn't know that One Tree Hill would be such a long lasting sitcom as it concerns, its relevance. I love basketball. I love a good story. I love a great villain. And it's got all of these things. So why wouldn't I love the show? I do love this show. So yeah, for those very reasons, Dan Scott this is also the same person that John Oliver has used as an example many times, actually twice that I know of in his show, and that's because Dan Scott is the meme that I'm sure you've all seen if you don't even know who Dan Scott is. The hospital patient bed, like the hospital patient that is stepping out of bed because he's waiting for a heart transplant, and the person that's supposed to deliver his heart trips and spills his heart onto the floor. Again, this is meme 101. If you don't know who Dan Scott is, by my explanation of just what exactly that meme entails, then I'm sorry, my friend. You may not be cool enough for the meme world. Google it. Just great stuff. Dan Scott. Every time I watch this show, which is probably now going on my fourth run from season one to the end of the show. And every time I always forget what happens anyway, so I mean, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but I just, because it's my fourth time, you'd think I'd remember most of what happened in the show. One might argue that it's not even that important. That's probably why I don't remember it. So it's probably why I thoroughly enjoy it. And it's probably why I'll give it a fifth, sixth, and seventh run. I love One Tree Hill. I love basketball. And it's a good show. So that's where I stand on One Tree Hill. Would I ever like to see it get rebooted? Probably not. The story kind of died down, and dare I say, nobody can ever replace Dan Scott. The person that played Dan Scott is the epitome of cringe. This dude is about it. And again, I can't explain it. You gotta like be vibing in on this show like a fanatic to really understand what I'm talking about and why I geek out on it so much, because it's a whole thing. I love watching this show just so that I can see what things he's up to. I mean, this guy deserves his own spin-off in a telenovela in every language ever, you know? I'm just saying that's how cool Dan Scott is as a villain, because he's everything and anything you have wanted but couldn't be, that's not super shady but awfully cringe. He is a monster, all right? And it's just it's a good character, and it's played awfully well by the dude that plays that character. If I ever saw that dude in real life, I would honestly, I'd freak out a little bit. I'd be like, that's Dan Scott, holy potatoes. Can you imagine seeing both the character, like the person in real life that plays the character of Dan Scott, while simultaneously seeing the person in real life that played Lex Luthor in Smallville? My mind would blow. You know, I would, like, seriously, you know, some people want to meet their heroes. I guess they're not my heroes so much as that they go against what my heroes stand for, you know? And they make a good case. I mean, because it's so complicated from their perspective. And again, because a lot of the time, some of these characters are very involved in the villain's early life. And it's just captivating. I am such a nerd as it concerns storytelling, proper introductions of characters, recurring characters, characters that are going to have bigger parts. I mean, it was Shakespeare, in fact, that said, the world is but a stage, and you are the performer. Something along those lines. Not quote unquote, because I'm not the person that can do that with Shakespeare stuff. But, you know, the thing is everyone enjoys a good story. It's got a beginning, it's got a middle, it's got an end, it's consistent. It introduces the hero, it introduces our anti-hero, it introduces, you know, which one of them is the protagonist, central themes and motifs and symbolism. All of these things make a really good story even better. So again, huge fan of Dan Scott. Huge fan of young Lex Luthor. Again, I do understand that the man grows up to be an absolute monster, but in his time, you know, hanging out with Clark Kent in the good old village of Smallville, I feel like it humanizes what otherwise might not able to be in that way from a storyteller's perspective. Just like Dan Scott, One Tree Hill would not be what it was or what it is today if it were not for Dan Scott. So, again, where's the Dan Scott spinoff? My name is Albert. This was Vlogs About Nothing. I really do appreciate all of you guys joining me every single night. Can't express that enough. So if you're not already, become a subscriber. It seems as if I've lost more than a handful this week. Maybe it's something I said. As every single time I see people drop off the channel, I always remind myself that sometimes I might say something that you might not like, or that might make us all feel uncomfortable, awkward, weird, and just kind of cringed out. You feel me? But don't fear. It's cool. It's just some middle-aged dude who doesn't want to shave for the next 6 months, sitting on his bed in his room talking about absolute nonsense. So don't take offense to it. Don't take this personal. I don't even take myself personal. Trust me, if I did, I think I'd be crying all day is what I would be doing. I wouldn't go anywhere. I would just be crying. So again, I'm Albert. Thanks again for watching my show. Have a really good night. And until tomorrow, we'll see everybody soon. All right? Bye.